I know I'm here to talk about leadership, and you're all leaders now, and you're leaders in the making. But I don't quite know what that means. So obviously, when I get asked to talk to a bunch of leaders who are obviously hoping for some hints or tips or some sort of wisdom, it's not going to really happen except in a peculiar way for me, and I call it my flying crooked way. Now, I know you like to sing. Do any of you like poetry? Hands up. Whoa. Excellent. Does anyone not like poetry? Does anyone not like? Yeah, exactly. Be honest. Yeah. And some of the rest of you will tolerate it. I'll tell you what poetry is really good at doing, and I'm only going to talk about this for a second. It's really good at summing up in a very short sentence what otherwise could take you ages to say. And on this kind of a talk, I found a poem a few years ago, written 100 years ago by Robert Graves, called Flying Crooked. And I'm going to read a bit of it for you. It's about a little, it's a cabbage moth, but that won't mean anything to an awful lot of you. It's the little white butterfly that doesn't even get called a butterfly. It's so common. It's called a moth, but it's white. And I was going to put up a picture of the little thing, but all the pictures were, I'm afraid, too pretty that I could find for free on Google, and I didn't want to be breaching copyright, because there'd be someone in the audience who'd know. Anyway, so I'm not going to put up a picture of it at all, but I'm just going to talk about this tiny little white butterfly. And it says, the butterfly, that he will never now, it is too late, master the art of flying straight, yet has, who knows as well as I, a just sense of how not to fly. He lurches here and there by guess and God and hope and hopelessness. Yet even the acrobatic swift has not his flying crooked gift. So I'm going to call this the flying crooked style of leadership as I talk to you today. I am living proof that you can end up with the best job in the country. Emily Logan might have said she has it this morning. She doesn't. I have it, only I don't tell her. And I end up doing exactly what I want to do and getting paid a living for it. And I hope making a bit of a difference. And I did it by lurching from here to there by grace and God and hope and hopelessness. It just happened to be. But I suppose it's not all unplanned. But my plans never work out. What I was able to learn, I suppose, over the years has all been based on something about law that those of you who close your eyes in sheer boredom when someone says they're a lawyer, I like that I'm a progressive lawyer, Sean. I'll remind myself of that. But for most of the time, if you say you're a lawyer, you close down the conversation. And you know, if you're wanting a conversation, it's not a great job. It used to be worse. Now bankers are even less like than lawyers, but anyway. But there are still better jokes about lawyers. If you look up lawyers on the internet, it's all jokes about them, and none of them is pretty. None of them is fun. But what I suppose what I learned an awful lot, and I learned that law is just a way of ordering your society, and I think I'm going to be coming back to that all along the way. In college, I wasn't intimidated by all the big legal names because I hadn't a notion there were big legal names. So, like, it didn't matter to me one way or the other, and that was something else I don't think ever since. I don't think I've ever been put off doing something because somebody says, someone like you can't do something like that. Actually, I suppose it was a help as well that my parents didn't know enough about law to be intimidated by it either. So none of us knew enough about it. But it is one of my lessons, I suppose, and one of the things that I can do is say, so long as I am competent to do it myself. Human rights is, again, it's another one of those topics you try not to talk about at a party until you find someone who's interested. Because you know the way where you see people saying, I'll be back in a minute, and you see them going over to the other side of the room and talking to whoever it is over there going, don't go back over there. So it's one of those things that's very important, but it's not necessarily something everyone wants to talk about. But sometime, if you're Googling, Google the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for one of the simplest pieces of writing in the whole world about what it is to be a citizen in this world, to be a participant in this world. Because human rights is a way, it's a legal system. It is a political system in some ways, but it is also a set of values. And through working with a lot of organizations, principally Amnesty International in the early years, I not only met a community of people all around the world who share those values, who share that understanding of how to analyze the world, how to look at the world. Looking at it through a human rights perspective is different through looking at it with the perspective of somebody who seeks to make a profit primarily. Looking at it with a human rights perspective is different to looking at it from the perspective of someone who wants to get elected in the next election. It is a firm set of values that recognizes that people are equal, that every individual is born equal in this world, and that in many ways we spend all of our lives trying to work to a finding that we will end up with equal rights for everybody. That's what I do. That's what I've managed to do over the years, most of the time as a hobby, really, because I was doing it outside of my day job. In the past 10 years, it's been my job to promote equality of access to the legal system, equality of access to justice. I've worked with human rights lawyers in the Gaza Strip, a little bit less in the West Bank and in Israel itself. And you have in Gaza some of the most committed human rights activists in the entire world, people who through thick and thin, and there's an awful lot of thin, who were able to say the rule of law must prevail, human rights must prevail, we keep standards, we keep decent standards, everybody is entitled to live in dignity. That's hard when you are in such a restricted, confined area where human rights are abused so regularly. The same is true in the West Bank and Palestine, but the same is true in Israel, where it can be even more difficult to be a human rights lawyer because you're seen as a traitor to your own people if you see other values. I've worked, have we people here from India? Yeah? You're to hoot. Everyone else hooted. Go, woo! The Indian constitution is very like the Irish one, but it's one of the most progressive in the world. In India, really progressive human rights lawyers have walked into the Supreme Court of India and have demanded, and their court has accepted, that there is a right for everyone to food. It doesn't mean everyone in India has sufficient food, but it is recognized as the law that it is a legal entitlement for everyone to have food. Have we people here from Denmark? Yeah, hello. Because one of the things about Amnesty International and big groups like that is you very often are working on places away from home. When it came to home, in my work with Amnesty International, I suppose I was one of the first people working on asylum issues, people who came to Ireland seeking refuge because of persecution in their home countries. It was to our colleagues in Denmark that we turned for good standards, for good practices, for ways of doing things in a decent way when you were dealing with people who were fleeing persecution. So we had all of these kind of things. Human rights is this lovely, widely accepted. You can't be a member of the United Nations. Your country cannot be in the United Nations unless you accept that human rights is a fundamental pillar of society. And still, how many of us don't work towards it? Because human rights does demand not exactly sacrifice, but it demands a different way of looking at things. It demands me respecting your rights, and you must also respect mine. It demands me saying I have responsibilities to others. It now, even in my lifetime in this area, it says I not only have responsibilities to my fellow human beings at home, but I also have responsibilities to the environment. So I think, though, that like everyone that I've met in the human rights field, everywhere, has shared some values. And maybe none of us have ever grown up. Because you know what kids say when they start playing with each other and something goes wrong or someone cheats? What do people say? It's not fair. That's what people say. And what I love is, at this very, no, I'm not old. No, I'm not. No, but I'm older than ye, for sure. And I'm still able to say it's not fair. And I'm able to say, not only do I say it, but that loads of other people in this country say it. And loads of people in every country say it. And the vast majority of the world know that you have to try to aim for fairness. And then we had a very difficult situation in Ireland 7 or 8 years ago, which has marked all of your lives as well, whether you come from Ireland, Northern Ireland, the States, Saudi Arabia. What other country have I not mentioned? What? I mentioned Palestine. I spoke for a good while about Palestine. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's pretty well all of you. But in all of these countries, there was, because really of terrible mismanagement of our financial markets, as well as a lot of local failure to put good systems in place when there was money. There was a recession that certainly affected the northern world, which left an awful lot of people in serious poverty. And one of the great privileges of my life has been being in my job now, when at a time when my country and the leaders of my country were very focused on protecting our financial institutions and our banks. And there was very little voice for people who were very shocked and hurt and damaged when their worlds fell apart and when they fell into serious debt, when jobs were lost hands over fist, when families were suddenly in situations where they could no longer manage to do the things they had been able to do, where school uniforms were a problem, where they hadn't been before, where there were no holidays, where there are people in that situation in this country today, and I guess in every country the same around here, that is affecting a lot of people still to this day. In those days, a human rights analysis, a voice for those who lived in poverty and for those who were suffering because the financial institutions were being prioritized, because big business and the saving of business was being prioritized. It was a privilege and a necessity that my organization was there and able to talk for those. But in a sense, it's a continuing struggle. You cannot save big business. You cannot even do that at the expense of driving people to live lives that are not lives of dignity. So I think for all of you, you do believe in living lives of dignity. And you do believe in creating lives with dignity. And that's really valuable. You can do it my way, you can do it your own way, because it doesn't matter. We're all flying crooked in our own way. We're all going from here to there. I think you do need the values that underlie it. You do need to know your own values. And you do sometimes need to take the step that you think is doing it the right way. And if you do that, maybe you will be better organized than me and end up where you're meant to be. But even if you don't end up where you're meant to be, you can't imagine the exciting possibilities that I still see available for me. So I'm going to stick with the flying crooked. I'm going to stick with the lurching from here to there. And I'm going to call it a gift, a flying crooked gift. And I give that to you as a gift to all of you as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.